And we're talking to Chris Tibbs, who is a candidate for the District 2 position, Kitsap County Commissioner.
We are.
Chris, what we'll do is give you 2 minutes to kind of introduce yourself and talk about maybe just very briefly why you decided to jump in again.
Right.
And then we'll do some Q&A.
Yeah, so real quick, Chris Tibbs, lifelong resident of Kitsap County. My family's been here since the 1860s. You may recall I ran 4 years ago for Kitsap County Commissioner. Didn't do as well as I would have liked, and we're going around for round 3. Although I feel I'm in good company with that. Incumbent Commissioner Garrido, I think she's on her 5th or 6th run. So she's won a couple, she's lost a couple. I'm hoping to maybe put a few more wins in that column. But I'm running because, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on in Kitsap County that are important to me. And I feel that we need really energetic leadership and maybe a fresh perspective for Kitsap County. I want to strengthen our economy, I want to improve our quality of life, and I feel my records of accomplishments have demonstrated that I have the knowledge, skills, and the relationships to move Kitsap County forward. In the interim between the time I ran 4 years ago and today, I've served as the Republican Party chairman, and I think I made a very significant contribution to the Republican Party of Kitsap County. I was instrumental in the 2013 election and helped lead Senator Angel's election in 2013, which she was successful. I recruited, managed, raised funds, executed campaign strategy, everything from writing mailers to looking at demographics and looking at statistical data. For our 2014 elections, that was the election where we really brought balance back to Kitsap County with the election of Ed Wolf, Tina Robinson, Phil Cook, and a number of state legislators. And so I have a lot of experience in elections and working through the process. I'm proud to say that I'm endorsed by the Affordable Housing Council in my race this time for Kitsap County Commissioner. 4 years ago, they supported Mr. Gelder. I'm proud to be supported by the Mason Kitsap Farm Bureau. Endorsed, of course, by more than 50 elected legislators, including Senators Angel, Sheldon, our local delegation, Representative Griffey, Caldeer, McEwen, Young. Locally here in Bremerton, I'm endorsed by Richard Huddy and Pat Sullivan from the Bremerton City Council, and I'm proud to have the endorsement of former Governor John Spellman in my campaign for Kitsap County Commissioner. Again, I have a number of relationships, which brought me to my second career a few years back when I started doing some nonprofit lobby work. Most recently, I secured $300,000 for the U.S. Turner Joy Association. And in that capacity, what I did was I reached out to our 9 legislators, Republicans and Democrats, brought them together, brought the mayor of Bremerton, Patty Lenton, involved. And we were able to partner with the Port of Bremerton, the city of Bremerton, and secure $300,000 to restore that historic ship in a time when a whole lot's not getting done in Olympia. You know, we have Democrats, Republicans, hyper-partisanship going on in Olympia, not a lot's being accomplished, but we could get all 9 of our legislators to come together and say, you know what, the number one thing, well not number one, but a significant issue to our area and to Bremerton is the funding and restoration of the historic USS Turner Joy. I'm very proud of that. So that's a little bit about who I am and what I'm doing, but I believe I want to, my 3 core issues here are really economic development. I want to rebalance our county government. We can talk about what rebalancing Kitsap County government looks like. And you know, I want to be a voice for South Kitsap. Commissioner Garrido has never actually carried South Kitsap in a general election. We have an antiquated system of government and how we elect our county commissioners. I'd like to advocate for charter. What I mean by that is in the primary election, only the district you reside in votes for you. In the general, the entire county votes for you. So for 20 straight years, Commissioner Garrido has not secured or won South Kitsap, which I think means that there's a lack of representing the people you represent. Here in the city of Bremerton, for instance, each city councilman is representative of just one district, which lets them really work for their district. And to that point, you know, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has upheld and made a ruling last year where they said that that system, the system in which we nominate by district but elect by countywide, is unconstitutional. That's currently being reviewed. The decision was Public Integrity versus the city of Tucson. So that's on review right now in San Francisco. But I think I stand on strong, firm footing when I say that if you're elected to represent a district, you should be able to be voted on by the people you represent. And with that, I certainly look forward to any questions.
Well, how did she get, if she was never been, if you have to be, how did you get to?
Okay, so Commissioner Guido has very successfully come in second place in the primary.
Oh, I see. So she's
over the
always
last 3
second,
cycles.
so she gets to the primary. Oh, okay.
And then after she gets to the primary, if you look at a map, and it's interesting to look at these maps when you see, and you color code all the different precincts, you'll see a wall of red from South Kitsap all the way to north, and then it goes blue into Bainbridge. And what we see, and I spent a lot of time doing this for the party, you know, there's between an 85 and 95% voter turnout on Bainbridge Island, and generally about 70% goes blue. And so in very close elections, like with Commissioner Guido and Tim Mathis 8 years ago, really, and 4 years ago with Linda Simpson and Commissioner Guido, if it wasn't for Bainbridge Island, she would not have won. And here's really where the rub comes. The rub is this, you know, we in county government, the county government has very unique baskets of services it provides to the county. So one basket it provides to the county as a whole is regional services. Things like Superior Court, county prosecutor, right? Roads, we don't do streets, but we do county roads. Bainbridge Island receives none of that service, or none of the direct local services. So Bainbridge Island would receive services like Superior Court or elections, but they don't receive services like land use, which is significant to the county. 70% of the population of Kitsap County does not live in one of the 4 cities, which means 70% of the population is really their only form of local government's the county. And so for the people of Port Orchard to never choose this individual and always have them represent their interests, I think there's a disconnect. So we need some charter, we need some sort of reform in county government. The state legislature in the House passed a measure that would have done that. I forget what House number that is, but it was passed, and it was really dealing with Spokane. And so the House, on party lines, passed a measure that would have allowed for commissioners to be elected by district and only by district, and proposed bumping up to 5 commissioners. So there'd be more dialogue, because right now when you have 3, it means the 3 of you really can't get together in private to hash out disagreements, was oftentimes really helpful. So, you know, remember, our form of government is about 100 years old. We haven't had a significant update to our form of government in about 100 years. I mean, the last time we had a significant update, it allowed for the elimination of term limits. People forget that we had term limits up until the 60s. So we got to think about fixing kind of the boxes and how that works with Kitsap County and how we provide that service.
How would you do that?
How would you fix it?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're saying you have to have a charter amendment or something.
Well, there's 2 measures, two methods. One is, you know, certainly the legislature, I think, will move forward on allowing that ability and making those changes, because we're a constitutional county, so we don't have the local option to decide how, for instance, what the positions are, how the elections are. That's decided in Olympia. The other method is for charter, where we would go through a charter process with the election of freeholders, write a specific charter to Kitsap County, and relook at how those positions are created, like they've done in King County, Pierce, Snohomish, Clallam County, Island County. So that's a much longer process that's initiated by the county commissioners. A simpler process, frankly, would be if Olympia simply allowed us the option, which is something they're considering to do. And it passed the House again by party lines, but the Senate, it got stalled up in the Senate.
Well, let's talk about the criticism you're making is Charlotte doesn't represent the people of South Kitsap.
Well,
No, that's fine.
I think it's fair. That's my
how you're
opinion.
I'm not, I hope I'm accurately explaining.
That's an accurate statement.
But here's what I want to know.
Yeah.
You were also somewhat new to that area of the county. When you ran the last time, you were running for the North End, and that's where you lived at the time.
Right.
So how do you then represent, why do you think you represent the folks down there, and what does that look like different than what has been happening?
Well, that's a good point. So one, again, I'm the only candidate in the race that can say I have won South Kitsap. So South Kitsap, whether I was living in the North End or not, said, you know what, Chris Tibbs is our person and we support Chris. And I can statistically back that up with data, so that gives me a good starting point, I think. But, you know, talking specifically about Commissioner Garrido and some of the areas in which I have concern, you know, I think that, you know, being a county commissioner is about listening to the people and your constituents, not necessarily driving your own personal agenda. And I think that there's some really good examples of things where county government is not supposed to be exciting. County government should never be cutting edge. I think when we talk about county government being cutting edge, maybe reduction of cost and improvement of quality of service is cutting edge. You know, if you look at Kitsap County's 6-year transportation improvement program, which essentially is a 6-year road plan, it's where we say, okay, over the next 6 years, here's where we're going to go, we're going to put money for roads. You know, what you look at is that the current plan calls for $75.9 million over 6 years to be spent on county roads. and only 19% or $14 million of that's gonna go to South Kitsap. Well, why is that?
It's
You know?
all going to Silverdale.
Well, yeah, 50% is going to Silverdale. But then you start looking at the county's own metrics where they say, okay, we have road deficiencies. So at present, Kitsap County's Public Works says that, you know, what we're looking at is about a 3% deficiency in South Kitsap, right? If you look at the different districts, there's different percentages. But if you take it out over 9 years, they're saying that because of the funding, they're anticipating a 25% road deficiency in South Kitsap. Now, roads are never exciting, but you need them. You need to build them correctly. You need to make sure that they're properly maintained, and those are arterials. That's how we get around in our community. So a great example of what I'm saying is, you know, look, we're not focusing on roads, we're focusing on food policy. Food policy is important, but county government should be roads, county government should be social services, county government should be the regional services that we focus on as a paramount duty. So if you can fully fund the roads, okay, well then we can start breaking off to other animals, what are other issues. But my thought right there is, you know, look, we gotta repurpose and relook at where we're putting that money. Remember, when they do road funds, when we generate that money, and it's a line item on your property tax, that money goes to Olympia, it's the county road fund, it's based on the number of square miles, or number of miles you have of road. And South Kitsap has just as much road as Central Kitsap. So why is there that disconnect? And we need someone in South Kitsap to say, you know, hold on now, let's look at how we can find creative solutions on roads. A good example about collaborative energy, and I think we need to do this, is, you know, the city of Port Orchard's in a bit of a pickle with the Tremont Road. There's some issues with Tremont, the interface there. Long and the short of it, it took approximately $44 million from the PSRC for planning and initial construction of planning, merely just planning and permitting for Tremont. And there's a specific window of time. So in about 1.5 years, they're gonna either have to begin construction on Tremont and the expansion of Tremont, or they're going to have to repay that $4 million, well, 3.5, depends on the interest, but $1 million. So, you know, I think that that'd be a great example for the county to say, you know, let's partner with you, let's have a county-city partnership to fix this Tremont issue. Looking at Bethel, you know, Bethel was proposed to be $45 million with debt service, and this was almost 20 years ago. We've never built on Bethel. That is a city road, but I think that certainly the constituents in Port Orchard are benefited, and that the county should be working and providing leadership with the city of Port Orchard to fix that road, to build that road, to make it usable. I mean, anyone that travels on Bethel in the afternoon or early mornings knows it's a dangerous road, and it's constrained.
Where do you live?
I live in Port Orchard,
Okay.
so. And the reason I moved is I became engaged, and I was so my bride to be lives in Port Orchard, so she's kind of geographically bound by a specific district as well. So
Let me kind of jump back to the start of that question again. You guys talking policy. Let me ask again about perspective, or what do you think that people in South Kitsap, they voted for you in 2012, probably because of the R next to your name.
well, that could
That's
be.
got to be hard.
I think it's my personality.
Yeah, but I mean, but there's also.
I think they said I was, but yeah. I mean, I would imagine.
To get past just the political label,
Well,
what do you think it is that you would bring that says, this is what I'm hearing,
Right.
how do you know that, what are the
Well,
issues that you
and to your point, so I've taken this very seriously. That means I've knocked and been more than 7,000 doors in South Kitsap, Manchester, Annapolis, Colchester, and been out there talking to people. And so I've talked to the citizens of South Kitsap. Now I am coming at this a little unique in that I held a countywide position where I worked with a number of voters and interest groups. So I'm very familiar with a number of the people and the issues in Port Orchard in particular. In fact, we used those issues as campaign issues 2 years ago, very successfully, I would say. But what I've been doing is reaching out and talking to everyday people and saying, what's going on? What are your concerns? Number one concern, roads. Number two concern, people are terrified of this heroin epidemic. They want some sort of solution for it. They're concerned we're not doing enough for heroin suppression. And number three that people are talking about is this affordable housing. So those are three issues, roads and transportation, chemical dependency issues, heroin in particular. And then number three is, you know, looking forward to moving forward and bringing us together. I lost my number three there. So
Affordable
affordable housing. Thank you. I'm looking at my notes. I'm going through them here. Affordable housing.
Well, if you're talking about affordable housing, give me your perspective on the comp plan process over the last year, because that's where development goes, as part of that process. Do you think the county do you like the vision? Do you
Well, I
have
think the
factor
vision's
on
interesting.
Where the density goes?
Right, right. So, as we know, the comp plan is required every 6 years. We have to go through this process. And it's complicated in that the county already became a litigant and was sued moving into the process even before they'd ever begun the process of looking at the comprehensive plan going forward. Kitsap County is constantly in legal and court challenges based on our comprehensive plan, so it's a difficult issue because it goes back to growth management and how we move population into the cities ideally. That's what GMA wants. GMA wants us to allow for development in the cities and really limit development in the county, and this kind of creates an artificial barrier. I've been very critical of the county, frankly. I think that we're pushing the comp plan too far too soon, and the reason for that is I don't think that the county has been properly managed during this process. The program hasn't been managed because, let's face it, 6 months ago, 7 months ago, Larry Keaton, the DCD director, retired. For 6 or 7 months, we haven't had a director managing the Department of Community Development. We have Jeff Rowe, who's a good man, the assistant, he's the acting director. The problem with that is now the commissioners are going to round 3 of hiring, so there's been 3 specific hiring cycles. Of the first 2, Jeff was never a finalist, wasn't selected, so he's the acting director. The staff know that he's not going to be the director, so I think there's a crisis of leadership there. I don't claim to be an expert on all land use policy. That's not my strength. My strength is hiring the right people who are, and management, and working through finding the right people. So I think the county really failed by not hiring a competent DCD director in a timely manner. I still think we need to have a director. Moving past that, looking at the process, staff really has been driving this process. And what I mean by that is you look at these 6 reasonable measures that the Growth Hearings Board came out and said we want to see some sort of progress, that you show that you're actually doing what GMA is supposed to be. And the 2 that come right to my mind that give me some hesitation are this transfer of development rights, which pretty much says that it's a rather convoluted approach. It sounds good in principle, but until you put it into practice, it's hard to prove how effective it is. And frankly, the one that's been proposed needs to be much more incentive-based as opposed to we're going to create some sort of way to transfer your development rights, allow you not to develop this property in perpetuity. What is in perpetuity? Well, that's forever. So we're talking about not developing our own property or transferring this property off the tax rolls in perpetuity. It's not really a market-based approach. The number 2 that concerns me is this rural legacy lots. I mean, essentially people purchase property many decades, over many years, under the understanding that this was going to be a parcel of property they would develop for a home, or for commercial purposes, or for an investment, and now they're being told, guess what? Well, what you did was lawful and legal at the time. Now we're going to say it's not. We don't want you to be able to develop on this through a rural legacy lot. And so I think that that's unfair. That's really pulling the rug out on a number of people that have made investments. Number 1 investment in people's lives generally is their home or their assets, their real estate. They put a lot of that money into real estate. And that gives me some concern. So I think that staff is trying to conform, kind of shoehorn Kitsap County into what the Growth Hearings Board would like. The problem is I don't feel that our commissioners have been as firm as they should be with the Growth Hearings Board. Let's make this very clear. The number 1 problem I have with GMA and Growth Hearings Board is this: it's not uniform. So that means if there's a Kitsap County issue and some part of our plan doesn't make sense in Kitsap County, and a citizen sues the county, and we go to the Growth Hearings Board and they say, okay, the setback here on fencing for farm, agriculture, whatever it may be, has to be 10 feet, not 20 feet. That's only binding on Kitsap. That's not binding on King County, Snohomish, or Pierce, the other counties that make up the Growth Hearings Board. So if you have a more proactive constituency that's suing you all the time, then you end up in a spot where you're always being the whipping boy, and the other counties aren't having the same impairment. So it's not consistent across the board. I'd much prefer taking the hearings board out of the equation and making it more of a superior court if we're going to maintain GMA as it stands right now. So, I think it's the process. I was with the Home Builders Association of Kitsap County. There was a presentation provided by Jeff and Commissioner Gelder. This was maybe 2 months ago, and it was the first presentation where they had engaged the developers in the county and said, here's what we're going to be doing. There was no communication really prior to that point, and we're 4 months into a comp plan update at this point. So there's not been a lot of bringing stakeholders together and talking to people. One of the comments that I thought was remarkable coming from that group was, well, do we have to sue you too so that we can be a member at the table when you're making these decisions up? And looking at these policies. So I think that we failed in that we're trying to push this through on the deadline, which is coming up. We're trying to adopt this with no leadership at DCD, and I think that a lot of things were dropped through that process. Now, is the program itself, the comp plan itself, overall a good? Well, I mean, I think that's going to be debatable because we have to go through the hearings board. I'm confident that, as always, it will be challenged and it will be appealed to the hearings board. I believe that Kitsap County will be defending this in a legal action, as we have over the last couple of comp plan updates and revisions, and we'll see. So it's very much.
Let me ask you just about the vision, maybe, because you're right.
Right.
It gets very complicated.
Right, and I'm getting down in the weeds here.
But the intent of this, of course, is to preserve some of the rural character, drive density towards the urban areas.
Right.
Do you think? I mean, do you share that vision for the county? Do you think that's a realistic vision for our county? Do you think there is alarm over losing some of those areas?
Well, to the vision, you know, I was speaking with some of our legislators just yesterday on the issue of GMA and how that impacts Kitsap County, and the question was, well, would you opt out? If there was a mechanism, would you take Kitsap County and opt out? And, you know, we've had growth management now for 20 plus years, and so I don't know if I agree with the vision of growth management. My frustration, frankly, is, you know, I was recently at a Realers luncheon, and Mayor Becky Erickson of Paulsbo was giving a presentation. And this is a good example of kind of where my needle goes. So the county is supposed to, by its very nature, limit growth and push into the cities. And she was talking about a development off of 305. There's a car wash coming in, right? They're going to put a new car wash on this corner lot. It's owned by someone who's owned it for some time. The property, probably 10 years. They're tearing down an old building a brand new car wash up. And she says, well, the reason I wasn't going to give them the permit, I wouldn't let them have the permit, is I didn't like the color. I didn't like the way it was looking. It was the ugliest car wash I'd ever seen. And my thought, and what I said, because I sometimes speak too much, is I said, that's outrageous. Because here we have someone who's building a multi-million-dollar project, who owns the property, who's trying to develop commercial real estate. Commercial property is going to bring sales tax and property tax to the community. And her big pushback was, well, you know, I don't like the way it looks.
The mayor individually?
The mayor said that this was her comments.
Okay.
Very clear, those were her comments. It was during her State of the City briefing to the Realers. But moreover, here was my thought was, you know, looking at this and thinking about this, how does that make any sense? Because if I'm a commissioner and I'm driving development to the cities, and then you have a no-growth mayor saying, well, hold on, I don't want to have to develop that, it becomes kind of a, so does GMA work? I think that it's still out as to whether GMA works. I side with allowing people to enjoy their land and use their land within responsible measures. You know, and so I think that we need to make the onus more on supporting the property owners, the people that have made this investment, who are paying the taxes, than trying to conform Kitsap County to a model that maybe doesn't work.
Is there a risk in the district you'd be representing, and what I'm talking about is specifically like the Phillips Road area.
Right.
A lot of houses suddenly going in there, possibly a lot more could be going, there's some utility issues.
Yeah, there's some utility
things
issues.
like
I was going to say that you live.
You know, that is a very complicated one down there. When you look at that district, how do you see the growth happening there? Do you worry at all we're going to lose some of those spaces, or is it we need housing? You said that was on your priority.
Right. Well, so let's talk about development. You know, and looking at housing. So South Kitsap has had some challenges with GMA. There's no question. In fact, you could argue that McCormick Woods was annexed into the city of Port Orchard specifically because there were challenges on that parcel of property as far as representation by the county, a level of service that they were unhappy with the county. You know, the sheriff's office averages 9 to 11 minutes response times to a priority 1 emergency in South Kitsap, as opposed to the city of Port Orchard, which is about 1.5 minutes. So those kinds of decisions are made.
For it, yeah.
You pay for it, yeah. So going into that, so that piece of land also included the land right off of Sedgwick, where originally they were going to build a Costco. They were going to build a Costco. They're going to build a Petco. They're going to build an Office Depot. They were going to build the Albertsons. They actually did build an Albertsons. That whole development was supposed to be right, if you're familiar with Gig Harbor on Burnham Drive, if you go to Gig Harbor where Costco is, all of that was supposed to originally be off of Sedgwick in what was unincorporated Kitsap at the time in South Kitsap. And it was outside of an urban growth area, so the county was not as agreeable to development. There were some permitting issues, much like with the raceway when we gave a permit but yet took it away. And so the developers moved on down to Gig Harbor, and now they're generating between $7 and $8 million a year in taxable revenue that would be directly proportional to Pierce County and Gig Harbor. So that money would have been in Kitsap and Port Orchard proper. So you're always dealing with this during the development when you're growing, whether it be commercial or whether it be residential. You have to work with what you have. The urban growth area for Port Orchard that's recently been reduced may have been too large. I think the reason they enlarged it to such a size and it was as big as it was, frankly, was in reaction to the failed Costco development that did not happen on Sedgwick. At the end of the day, the only people that developed was Albertsons. And so here you have what would be good property, but there were some other issues as well as utilities and waterway and all that. But would have been a good development for Kitsap County, would have benefited our community. We're talking about jobs and affordable housing, and it just didn't happen. And so there's a history in Kitsap County where we kind of move the line, and we pull the rug out oftentimes when we're making when we're working on very potentially positive development deals. We pull the rug out. I mean, if you look at NASCAR, whether you supported NASCAR or you didn't support NASCAR, let's remember that the county commissioners at the time, one of them is now our Mayor Patty Lamb Bremerton, actively pursued NASCAR, pleaded with them, sold Kitsap County, wanted them to come in. They came in, did due diligence, started doing the permitting process, and then we had an election and we pulled the permit and kicked them out. So it's hard to have development in South Kitsap or anywhere in Kitsap County without consistency in the process, openness and fairness, because you know what? After going through that downturn, NASCAR looked pretty darn good. And there's a lot of jobs we could have had we been able to make that parcel of property more commercially viable. So
I wonder, County or South Kitsap County, with the existing revenue, do you think anything needs to change in terms of that, either the amount or the way revenue is collected? Or is it just spending it more efficiently?
well, yeah, so a lot of the amount of revenue, how it's collected, the manners, sales tax, property tax, a lot of those are dictated by Olympia. And so any sort of solution to try to change that would be a statewide initiative, because it's pretty clear in state law that we can collect this way or that way. Kitsap County's general fund, we have 3 separate funds. It's important to understand that we have the general fund where most of our services are paid for, law and justice, elections, DCD, which is kind of also quasi because it's also an enterprise fund. An enterprise fund, the concept there is like our utilities, and it pays for itself, and you put some surplus aside. And you have a third fund, which is special revenue fund, which is pass-through money. Like we get federal money for our social services, and we steward that, take a small percentage for management, and we fish that out and give that to Kitsap Mental Health. So as far as funding, we are what we are. County government is well codified, well structured how we receive our funds. There's certainly always grant opportunities, and I'm always about looking forward to new grant opportunities. I think that overall we run an efficient government. I'd like to look at new ways of maybe supporting our people a little bit better. The assessor's office, for instance, is still at 0.9 man hours per month as opposed to a full one employee per month. So they're a little less than 40 hours in a pay cycle. So I think there's opportunities to maybe kind of let us grow a little bit as far as our level of, as long as we're bringing that level of service back to meet the needs of the people. Where I think, for instance, we could be a little bit more, where we have some opportunities like the 1/10 to 1% for mental health. That's a tax that was assessed by the county commissioners, the sales tax, and right now we take a large portion of that money, and right now we have a $2 million reserve. So they've chosen to create a $2 million cash reserve. So when we bring this money in, we always have a soft bottom of $2 million. And I'd be much more inclined, the model right now is to spend that money in a way that creates new programs or new opportunities to address some of the mental health funding. I'd be more inclined to put a portion of that money directly towards service providers like Kitsap Mental Health and bypass that process. If you look at Kitsap Mental Health, there was a reduction. They had essentially a $4 million deficit. They made up $2 million. They had to let some people go over the last couple of weeks. And I think that if we as a county have the money and it's literally sitting in the bank, let's help them by giving them new, consistent, steady funding as opposed to one-time only funding to start a project. Because oftentimes with social services, the hard part, it's always hard getting money for social services. It just is. But my point is, the hard part is the reoccurring money, is that consistent funding. Because oftentimes you don't know what kind of benefit you're receiving on this social service program until it's been many years. As opposed to a new grant comes in, we spend the money, and then it's gone. When I was on the county budget committee, and I was the vice chair for the county budget in 2000, I want to say 11 or 10, we had the juvenile department come in. Juvenile services is a branch of Superior Court. And what had happened was we had a director of that department who was always underfunded. Always underfunded. And so he found many creative ways to find new funding. A lot of that was grant funding. And the crisis became that 1/3 of his workforce, 1/3 of his employees, their entire existence was set on grant funding. And as that grant funding was all coming down to a crash, when the recession hit, it took a huge hit on juvenile services. So when we look at these community organizations or social service programs, I want to have a steady funding. And frankly, what's the point of collecting $2, $3, $4 million a year and sitting on it? The citizens have an expectation, if we're going to collect that $2 million for mental health services, that we should spend that on mental health services. It doesn't do anyone any good but Bank of America to leave it there at Bank of America to build interest.
That's true for the money that they've stockpiled or this.
And they're doing great things.
But there is no guarantee in a recession that the sales tax would produce the same level of revenue that it's now. So, steady is steady goes.
And we have a fairly significant revenue that's also set aside for our own personal soft bottom as well, besides that $2 million.
But I just wanted.
Jim has a question to ask.
Fair.
So Chris, is your sole source of income from your nonprofit lobby
Yeah.
efforts right now?
Well, so I actually do sales for a local coffee roasting company, and then I do nonprofit work as far as income, and I'm blessed to have the love and support of a wonderful individual who also happens to be a dentist. So
You mean, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. You work for a nonprofit, which is,
he's referring to the Republican Party.
oh,
and
the
my
Republican
nonprofit work.
Party. Oh,
And I've done
sorry.
consulting
I thought you were
and lobbying.
I thought the way you were talking, maybe you were working with mental health or something.
No. I did some work with Mason County as it relates to mental health funding. We looked at securing some funds for Mason County as well as a triage crisis center.
Okay.
So I've done so this last couple of years I've done pretty much 3 things. I've led the Republican Party. I've spent a lot of time consulting various candidates throughout the state and
Right.
winning elections on their behalf with them. And then I've done some lobbying in Olympia on very specific nonprofit issues, like the Turner Joy, or like helping Mason County find some funding for mental health.
Okay.
Your position on the fast ferry, or that so-called fast ferry, passenger only,
Well, so what's the question? Just my position
what is your
overall.
position on the ferry?
Well, so I do support a ferry scheme. I think that there's value to looking at maximizing our waterways. I think the current proposal from Kitsap Transit is not manageable. I think it's a little bit too much. Kitsap Transit is asking the entire county to implement a $10.8 million tax, the sales tax, which, as we all know, Republicans and Democrats, is a pretty regressive tax. And I think that there's certainly challenges. I like the concept of a fast ferry. I'd like to make something happen with the Ridge Passage 1, which has been in Bremerton for almost 10 years and is not moving. But I think the price tag at $10.8 million gives me a lot of hesitation. I think Kitsap Transit needs to really focus on routed bus service. And I'd like to see Kitsap Transit really focus on that core mission. When you look at Kitsap Transit, and Kitsap Transit is a municipal corporation. It's governed by the 3 county commissioners, 4 of the mayors, and 2 city council members, 1 from Bremerton, 1 at large. I think that it's trying to be too much of a future organization. Where do we want to be in 20 years, as opposed to addressing where we need to be right now? You want to talk about reducing traffic on the roads? Only 1/3 of the shipyard workers currently use the worker-driver program or use Kitsap Transit buses. Only 1/3. Why aren't we going after that to make that 2/3? That's going to reduce congestion. That's going to make a more efficient use of Kitsap Transit dollars. So, passionately ferry, and in full caveat, I want to be clear, Kitsap Transit asked me to look at statistical data over the last couple of election cycles, so I did prepare a report and looked at statistical data on behalf of Kitsap Transit about a year and a half ago to see what the ballot measure would look like. And frankly, this is no secret, my opinion was that it was unmanageable to do it as a countywide vote. It was unfair to the vast majority of blue-collar Kitsap County. And, you know, at the end of the day, Kitsap Transit needs to find a better way to get workers to the shipyard, not necessarily to get white-collar laborers to Seattle. And so I think maybe looking at more of a subscription-based system for Kitsap Transit's foot ferry. If you're going to pay a premium to travel on the boat, maybe have like the BC model where you have subscription, or you have a subscription base where you can go in, you can book passage and know that you're going to have a seat. I mean, we're doing this at movie theaters now. I went to a movie theater, and Michelle and I, we snuck away. We watched Finding Dory, which was great. It was our moment, it was our date night, right? She was out doorbelling, I was out doorbelling. And we went to the AMC in Silverdale, and I was surprised. There's actually, you registered you got a specific seat, right? So if we can do that for the movie theaters, and you can do that for the airlines, if we're gonna do this with passenger-only ferry, we need a plan B. We need to look and say, what would plan B look like? Can it be self-sustainable? Well, public transit's never 100% sustainable, but let's make it as close to sustainable as we can, and let's not invest $10.8 million a year of sales tax generated revenue on this process. That's my thought.
Thank you.
Well, that's about the time that we had promised for this interview, so it's good that we covered the number of topics that we did. But before we go, I always say, give us a parting shot. It can just be as simple as, here's what separates me from the other people running for this job, and what does make Chris Tibbs unique for this role. And I also always say, if there was a point that we missed that you wanted to throw out there, feel free to do that if you have something that's important.
But real quick, you had a question earlier, and you raised your hand, and then you didn't answer.
That was
Yeah, I think it was Jim.
So he
So-
covered
so-
it.
so we-
People get us confused all the
Same
time.
question. Okay. Well, it's you're all on this side of the table, and I'm here. So I remember first time I went to an interview, they had a little school desk right in the center. There was a big, huge, probably 50 people round table, and you sat at this little school desk in the middle. And I'm trying to talk to people, and I'm trying to do this, and that was the most intimidating interview I ever had. And then I went and they endorsed the other guy, but it's okay. So points. Well, here's the thing. Look, I am who I am. I'm direct. People know me as Chris. I'm very direct. I'm very open. I don't have all the ideas. I'm never going to say I am. In a position of county commissioner, no one has all their ideas. County government, by its very nature, is a very complex animal. Funding sources are very complex. Our community issues are very complex. What I can commit is this. I will be attentive to the needs of South Kitsap. I will be a champion for our community. I have the relationships with our elected officials in Olympia and throughout the county, and I'm confident that I can build a stronger Kitsap County, and that together we can have a better quality of life. I'm committed to, coming together and being dedicated to making sure that we're improving our public transportation, that we fix our broken roads, that we improve our public safety, that we preserve our parks and open spaces, and we need to decrease these unnecessary regulations that really impede the development and the enjoyment of our community. Kitsap County is a very unique community. I'm very proud to have lived here my whole life. Like many of you, I really appreciate our community, our neighbors, and I would like the opportunity to serve, represent, and champion our issues. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.